Mr. Dardiri Mohammed Ahmed, Foreign Minister of Sudan, thank you very much for talking with Voice of America Extremism Watch Desk.
You're most welcome.
We're talking about Sudan and terrorism. The U.S. listed Sudan as a state sponsoring terrorism, and your country officials stated that Khartoum has taken measures to combat terrorism and to promote security in the region. Also, the U.S. country report acknowledged those efforts, but still the U.S. emphasized that Sudan should continue to improve its human rights record, advanced peace process, and enhance humanitarian access. What has your government done, and what is it planning to do in the future to improve the situation?
First, we should state that the listing of Sudan in the list of states sponsoring terrorism was politically motivated. There was no action of terrorism that was traced to Sudan whatsoever. Even the reference to the existence of Osama bin Laden at one particular time in Sudan, that has taken place way before he has taken to his terrorist acts and in activities that were very much known and acknowledged by everybody. So the listing was politically based, and now the delisting is also very much intertwined with politics. As you have said, the United States already acknowledged that Sudan is doing tremendous efforts with respect to combating terrorism in that part of the world. The United States had already issued some reports in this area, but nonetheless, we are right now just starting a lengthy process of delisting Sudan, and this process is right now starting at a political level, and it would continue for quite a time at the political level, and then after that it will start at the legal level and for a prescribed period of time. So it's a political process that led us to this list, and now a political process that is supposed to lead us out of this list.
According to Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, there are concerns about human rights violation in Sudan, including suppression of peaceful demonstrations, attack on media, and ongoing violence and torture. What do you say to this concern?
Well, of course, Sudan is part of the region in which it lives, in which it is situated. We are suffering a lot of problems in that part of the world. We are facing a lot of difficulties. And of course, those difficulties are very much connected to the performance of countries when it comes to issues of human rights. Nonetheless, particularly over the previous few years, Sudan performance in the field of human rights had improved immensely. Out of the year 2017, that was recognized by the Human Rights Council. Now, in the year 2018, Sudan is being accepted as a country that would exit the special procedures before the end of this year if it accepts that a human rights office would be situated in the country. We are working closely right now with the UN Human Rights Commission to see to it that this office will be established in due course, and then Sudan exits the special procedures on human rights, a testimony to the improvement that is being made in Sudan with respect to human rights.
Sudan was once a safe haven for terrorist groups and their leaders. Osama bin Laden once sought refuge in Sudan. What has your government done to counter terrorism in the region, and how do you think your government will convince the international community that Sudan will never become a safe haven for terrorists?
When Sudan hosted Osama bin Laden was not having anything by that time to do with terrorism. By that time, he was the leader of a construction company the Bin Laden group of company, which is a famous group in Saudi Arabia, and he was accepted, he was allowed to enter Sudan simply to start a development project, namely a project of an airport that was built in Port Sudan, and also building a road from Sudan to Atbara. Those were the projects that were made by Osama bin Laden during his stay in Sudan. After Osama bin Laden left Sudan, then he started taking into whatever activities that he later adopted and established Al-Qaeda. So when Osama bin Laden was in Sudan, that was by no means calculated as hosting or giving a person a safe haven who is a known terrorist. That was definitely not the case with respect to Osama bin Laden. Likewise, Sudan had been accused falsely as being a safe haven for terrorists. That was not the case for Sudan. As I have said earlier, no particular terrorist attack was ever traced to Sudan, and no particular terrorist was named as a person who was taking Sudan as the place of stay over the period that in which we were listed as a state sponsoring terrorism.
The U.S. has lifted sanctions on Sudan and in 2 decades of embargo, yet the Sudanese economy is deteriorating. What are your country's next steps to improve the economy?
First, we should state that the United States should follow through with what it has taken, the measures that it has taken to lift the economic sanctions on Sudan. Up to now, the economic sanctions are in place. We haven't yet witnessed any change with respect to banking transfers outside Sudan or to Sudan. And those are measures that are attributed to nobody other than to the U.S. and to the measures that were adopted by the U.S. Those measures are affecting our economy negatively. They are affecting the average people of the street, and they are really harming all of the humanitarian and development efforts the government is undertaking. Nonetheless, the government is doing its best to see to it that the situation improves by trying to approach other corners of the world where it can gain assistance, like China, like Turkey, like Russia, and other countries of the world which are ready to help Sudan in its current situation.
Sudan economy is clearly not in a good shape. Some blame it on sanctions, others blame it on Sudan's government's economic policy and corruption. What do you say to those who accuse your government of corruption?
Well, of course, measures have been taken in the country to address all of issues that has been raised with respect to corruption. We have started a crack on corrupt entities, and this is a process that would be continuing. It's an ongoing process. Nonetheless, when it comes to the economic difficulties we are facing, those are very much related to the sanctions that we are now in because of the decision that was taken by the United States of America. Because of the sanctions, the average Sudanese cannot access medical services. They can't travel outside of the country or return to the country because also of the effect of sanctions on aviation. They can't even also find very important services at reasonable prices because of the escalation of prices and because of the inflation in the country, and you name it. Definitely the country is suffering a great deal because of the economic sanctions that were imposed by the United States, and by far that cannot be compared to any accusations or claims of corruption that might be existing in the country.
Let us turn to the peace process with South Sudan. What has been done in that front, and are you optimistic about the peace?
Well, of course, South Sudan had continued to suffer for a while from the conflict that has taken place over there. As of the year 2013, South Sudan had never been stable. Now we had arrived at a peace agreement with the assistance of Sudan, of course. And this peace agreement is right now entering its second month. So it's very early to tell whether this peace agreement will hold or not. We are very much optimistic. We are thinking that South Sudanese had learned the lesson, and we will be working closely with them to see to it that this agreement holds and peace returns to South Sudan.
Mm-hmm. And what are Sudan's next step to strengthen its diplomatic ties with the United States?
We think what we are doing in the region is helping us not only with the United States, but with the international community at large. We have single-handedly worked with respect to the issue of South Sudan, despite all of the misgivings and skepticism. Currently, we are undertaking another process under the umbrella of the African Union regarding the peace and reconciliation in CAR. And we are doing our best to see to it that our region stabilizes. Whether the United States will finally consider this as being qualifying Sudan to be dropped from the list of states sponsoring terrorism or not is, of course, a matter for the United States to determine.
Would you please tell us about your meetings with the State Department, and are you optimistic, and do you think that your mission was accomplished?
Well, we had very good meetings at the State Department. We have discussed the issues thoroughly and constructively. We feel that State Department senior officials are ready to listen to Sudan and ready to evaluate the situation in Sudan on the basis of the development that are taking place currently in the country. They are very much appreciative of the efforts that had been exerted by Sudan, whether internally to see to it that peace prevails within the country itself, and that also our efforts of including others in government succeed. We also appreciate, or rather they also appreciate, that Sudan is now playing a very instrumental role in the region, particularly with respect to South Sudan. So we feel that people here are listening and willing to understand what is taking place in the region, and also to help Sudan with respect to the future endeavors in South Sudan.
Foreign Minister of Sudan, thank you very much for speaking to Voice of America.
You're most welcome.